We are now live.
So this is Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing our creative work on the 2023 budget, and we've got some creative language that's going to be presented to us. So we'll start with you, Sarah.
Which let's go with adult day.
Okay, let's start. All right. Okay. So it's going to tell them to do what we thought they've been doing right along.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I think I did communicate with the staff at AHS, Diva and Dale, and I think that they have done some exploratory work with the adult days, but they really haven't been able to make much progress in terms of implementing an alternative payment model. So this language,
This will help them find a way.
this will ask them to come back and report to us on their progress on January 15th.
And this hopefully will help us deal with absences and whatever.
So actually, this was in the works, and I think in the switch from one commissioner to the next in Dale, it got lost.
Well, and then Corey left Diva and
Right.
they were working
And
on.
I think all of that kind of fell apart.
Well, this is to remind them that we still would like to, because we know from the other experience that when you have those, that payment model, it helps stabilize. It's that fee for service really creates a tremendous instability. So, committee, are you, this is to really put back on the agenda that this is something that we view as important.
Good idea.
Okay, all right, so we'll close that out and add it. If they're getting the,
Whichever one is that.
Pre-apprenticeship.
they're getting the 7%. But this is changing their, yeah, the reimbursement.
Thanks. I'm not sure if you want me to tee this one up.
You're doing fine. We've been doing this together, so.
Okay, that's why you have coffee and donuts every morning.
Yep.
All right, so this is the CTE connection.
Yeah, so similar, and you can see on this, the bottom of the page is language that was included last year. I used it to model language this year, which is basically within section B318, which is the Child Development Division of DCF. It's asking them to carve out $100,000 of their federal funds to go towards the Vermont Department of Labor for a pre-apprenticeship program in early childhood education.
And I would remind that that was an initiative out of this committee.
So we are creative.
Yeah, there are now, they started last fall really taking students. There are 17 students in the technical centers doing it.
And who opposes it? Anybody?
You just carved it out of
We just started it out, and I'm just giving background.
All right, but do they know we're carving this out and have a
They don't
position?
know we're carving it out yet, but there are, the advocates, there has been requests.
Okay.
And the program is moving ahead and no one,
So how much of these are out of the federal funds? So this is a permissible use.
We know that the new budget has a little bit of a tick up in the child development grant.
All right, well, I think workforce and trying to get a pipeline, as it's called, is something that's very important here, so.
and this is the front level, you know, we put money in for scholarships and grants, and you're going to see, the next piece is, those scholarships and a piece around the scholarships and grants, childcare workers to move ahead. These definitely would be the first level of people that would,
All right, so, is that,
I'm confused about the relationship between the top language and.
this is the old language?
That's the language from last year in the budget.
Right, but why do we need?
We don't, I used it to model the language at the top, and
She's
probably
just
should have
a
related,
reference.
yeah.
Number 3,
Yeah.
that's really
It's
what
just
she
the
was.
So which?
But I guess my question is, if this is Act 74 and it went into law, why do we need it?
It's one time money in
Ah,
74.
it's one time money.
So the only thing going in is the section above the red line?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's just basically to continue the work and support that pipeline.
Another 100,000.
Through the CTE.
Another, because last year was one time, and this would be one time again.
Yeah.
So committee all set with that? Well, let's move right along, Sarah.
Okay, we're moving on to provider rate increases.
So
You, I don't,
you wanna talk about that?
Or are we out of sequence?
I think there's a related childcare item.
Yes.
All right, so go with that first then.
Okay.
All right.
Which is a request for $125,000 for early childhood educator recruitment.
It was in the budget last year. This is a continuation. Many of the same kids, once they get out of high school and get to tech.
What's the source of this money? And we having to appropriate general fund here?
This draft says general fund.
Yeah, but I think we need to check on, I wanna raise the flag around that 125 to let you know, we haven't finished the work on that, but
Oh,
we're close.
all right, we'll put you on the list. What are these provider increases?
So this is language that the Agency of Human Services requested related to what is now a 7% increase in the House budget. They have vetted this language with Vermont Care Partners, and AHS has indicated Vermont Care Partners is okay with this language. It essentially says that the providers that receive this rate increase shall be transparent in the use of their funds through timely and accurate reporting as defined by the state, including some specific performance measures and data collection. And so they're asking for this to be included in the Senate version of the budget, the Agency of Human Services.
What if it's 7%, it's very significant, budget, obligation, so I think we need to, this is accountability. This is really saying we need to make sure that, including specific performance, measures, the agency will determine those performance measures.
Yes, and they're actually within their, what formerly used to be called the master grant agreements with designated agencies, there are performance measures that are included in that. And so I anticipate this will be, further built into those agreements with the providers.
The language is slightly ambiguous. It makes it sound as though the providers are gonna come up with the performance measures, when it seems like what we're asking them to do is to comply with specific performance measures, but I don't suppose.
Do you want to edit?
Not really. I mean, yeah, all right.
No, I don't mean that. If you want to see if it needs to be clearer.
Yeah, I mean, you could just change providing to comply with, and then it's.
Including complying with specific performance
Yeah,
measures.
well, yeah, that's, I think, this is providing complying with.
Are state agencies required to do this?
What?
Our
State agencies have to.
Well, one might,
They're not, this is the increased money out in grants to the designated agency.
no, but I think what
That,
Senator
but-
Sears is saying, that we're putting 10% into state system, are we putting a comparable? One would think that's, should be part of our budget. When we come back, if we agree on certain areas, we can put in the same kind of requirement to report back. I don't know
Well,
where those
I'm
might
thinking
be.
I'm thinking of things like the new mental health program starting up, the treatment center, the other things we're doing.
Okay,
seems like if
like the
we're-
mobile.
Yeah, if we're requiring this of childcare agencies, whatever, why wouldn't we provide the same kind of scrutiny for state agencies that seem to,
Don't they have to do that now?
or does the auditor,
An agency that's a direct service provider. Makes a direct service provision or-
Well, I think what Senator Sears is saying, are we getting the same accountability from our own state agencies that are providing services directly? And I'm sure we have a lot of data, and I'm sure that it gets reported as part of the budget. I'm not sure how much attention it gets, but I don't know, B 107, 307, 314, 330, et cetera. Are those all DAs, SSAs, and
Those are all of the appropriations at AHS that are impacted by this rate increase. So it's the various appropriations in Dale, DMH, and then there's one in DIVA, where the ACCS providers that are getting this increase.
well, I think maybe if we can agree with this, I think then we can, when we're looking at the budget and where money's going or anything specific, we can look at reporting back or something. It's so hard because we'd like a one-page summary, and what we get is a 40-page, half of which is reciting the statutory language. And you look at it and it tells you, well, I read it and I said, what does this tell me? The only report that I really got was a one-pager, and Ina Backus did it, and it basically said we don't recommend it. And I thought, wow, that's the best, most succinct report I've ever read. But for where we're talking about the 7% increases, we'll close it out and keep it. And we'll rely on you, Dick, to think about where else we want to have some kind of reporting back, other than, normal operations.
Well,
You want to, because this is.
I'll think about it. I think it's probably people that are working directly with the public.
In this case, these are the providers that are getting the 7% increase. Which we've locked Choices for Care and, but we can make it more expansive, but right now this language is for that particular group. You all right to move ahead on this and then think about where else we want to look at that kind of reporting? And data and measurement. I don't know that the government account, the GAC.
Yeah, they're doing some of it, aren't they?
Well, I don't know as if those are really particularly useful. And that the auditor's office really looked at them and he said, how do you apply them?
The chief performance officer, I think, recently delivered their kind of program performance management budget and then the metrics to the General Assembly, I think just a week or two ago, and you're right, it's a very thick document for each.
Designed to glaze people over and amount to nothing. I don't, most people are not plowing through. That's why, as I say, sometimes a one-pager is really all you want. What did it amount to? If we were intending, were you able to, what's your vacancy rate went from this to this, or we were able to raise wages from this to this, we were able to, I don't know, those are just that, to me, that's the kind of stuff you want, pretty basic. Not are you self-actualized. Maybe that'll be next year. After we do our John Quixote. All right, we're gonna move along.
So this
I'm
one's
gonna,
okay.
we're gonna close this out and we'll make the change, including complying with specific performance measures. And you got that, Chrissy?
I just want to point out, Don Quixote doesn't.
Are you
like
doing
it so
six
bad.
branches?
Yeah.
Going to do this one.
Interview. And I think it's pronounced Don Jewin. It's a true one. Who wrote that? Byron, okay. Thank you for refreshing my memory about confabulation of the bells.
Internet.
I think,
Yeah.
who was, that was worth.
Yeah.
All right, now we gotta get back, now that we've,
Stepping away from human services.
all right. So this is a rewrite of the section that was, it seemed like it was really complicated and had all fees and so forth. So this is a rewrite.
This is a rewrite that we'd like your feedback on. It was The rewrite was modeled after what's required in statute for the annual fee report. And so if you recall, there's every, I guess, third year, different parts of state government have to provide the fee report to the legislature. And so
Oh, I don't think they've been doing that. The last one.
they did, they provided one in January.
That's the first time in 5 years, though. Isn't it? Have we-
Document are we working on?
We are, E-106, it's language, Dick,
Executive branch fees.
and fund deficits.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So you got it now?
No, I'll get it. I'll find it.
All right, you sent it, Chrissy?
I did, I'll just send it again so it's in the top of your inbox.
It's okay. I think I got it. E-106, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right,
Okay.
we'll keep going,
We
Sarah.
can walk through each section for a little bit longer. So A is basically referring back to the report that was required in Act 74 of the 2021 session that the Commissioner of Finance and Management provided related to revenue that was foregone in one fiscal year due to lack of inflationary increases in certain fees, including the Agency of Transportation. And if you recall, I think the bottom line from that report is essentially that I think roughly $20+ million was foregone due to the lack of fee increases over time. So Part B requires the Commissioner of Finance and Management to submit an inventory of all existing fees within state government to the Joint Fiscal Committee in November of 2022 in Excel format.
All fees.
All fees. So to include those collected by the executive branch, including the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the State Treasurer, as well as fees collected by the judicial branch. Then the items detailed in 1 through 6 below essentially mirror what is in statute in terms of the requirement for the annual fee report. So it's information, the hope is that it's information that the administration is used to collecting at least every 3 years. I think at AHS, we did have to go through the exercise of producing the information in the fee report.
Stephanie?
And I think they think that that's something they can produce, even though it's all fees. Because ideally you have it in.
Because it's all
Yeah.
in this, having it in this format.
Yeah,
What's the advantage of doing all this?
Because it tells us what money, if we had a fee increase, would be available. The area that's really hit the hardest is probably transportation. And in the absence of a fee increase to the T fund, we won't have sufficient funding to draw down the federal dollars that are going to be available through the federal infrastructure
So we're
grant.
doing all this so we can get federal money?
No, this is money, these are user fees that, like your registration, your license, that haven't been updated. Obviously, your lifestyle's improved considerably because you haven't had that $2 increase, Senator Starr.
You're darn right.
And I wish you'd send us a note of appreciation, but in total, it adds up to about 15 million in
But I
transportation.
need Back of this paper.
Yeah, so this is really to put to the forefront that we need to do a fee increase, because the longer you stretch them out, the larger they are, and then people do notice them. But, if you had done it on that annual, not that annual, but on that regular 3-year cycle, it's modest and much more.
Yeah, but this isn't gonna bring the fees back, it's only gonna tell us what we haven't
Already know.
received.
It's designed to make a case.
It's designed and with the expectation that we will be doing a fee. Whether the administration proposes one or not, I suspect the legislature will say,
Oh.
we're gonna have to move forward some
So,
to fees.
so we can make a decision.
We can, so we go through the fee bill, there's a fee bill that
Yeah.
normally would be the vehicle that this would be done, but it hasn't been done for 3 terms, so.
I'm just wondering about the last sentence.
Uh,
Is,
For page 1, page 2,
sorry, page 2 of this.
shall include a proposal to increase.
Yeah, I mean, we're mandating that finance and management come forward with a policy proposal of our choosing. And I know where we want to go. I'm just wondering if that's a bridge too far in terms of what we can demand of.
Well, I think what this is really doing is, if the fees are being increased and we're seeing a default onto the general fund, which is budgetary. So that's, I believe, what that last sentence is desired to do, because over time you forget, and we're seeing numerous proposals to have the general fund pick up costs
No,
because.
I totally agree with that. I'm just saying, suppose we said the report showing proposal to increase property taxes. We would all say, well, you can't force the administration to do that. And I'm wondering if they wouldn't see this.
It's a proposal.
Yes, but we're asking them to come forward with our policy proposal.
Oh, okay, so your suggested proposal it carries the impression that they are proposing it when
Right,
they're being coerced.
right. So I don't know, if they can't come forward with that policy proposal, they should explain to us how they're going to address those deficits.
We could actually put that last sentence in some form as opposed to come forward with the proposal to increase a new sub C, big C under little c, about where identifying where revenues raised do not fully cover the cost of providing the service, product, or regulatory function.
Mhm.
As opposed to saying, come and
Yeah,
tell us, come with your proposal, because we told you to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
An
separation.
alternative to a fee increase to cover the cost of providing the service.
so maybe we could rework that a little bit, that last sentence.
But the other issue on this is the general fund has increased over the last few years. And what we don't know is how much of this being gone created that to increase either. People had more money, they spend more money, so then that generates taxes. So we don't really, I mean, we're gonna get what this lost, but we aren't gonna know that some of
Did
this
they take the
money.
$2 and spend it on something taxable? But then it's not $2, it's 6% of $2.
Yeah.
So, so I think that's hard
It
to
would be
calculate.
a small.
It could be, depending on the fee. All right, so we're gonna rewrite this a little bit as we talked about, and we'll create a C and make it clear that we are, that we, in no way do we want to have this identified as though the administration's proposing anything. Good. All right, you want to come back to that? Okay. Do you have other language?
I think that's it for me. That's it for you.
So we'll just rework that last section. Miss you in person, Adam, but see you there. Right below Senator Sears. So we have our adjunct staff here.
I'm listening intently, Madam
I
Chair.
bet you are, particularly on the last one.
The last one, I am biting my tongue until I'm invited to speak, however. I'm happy to look at your rewrite.
Okay. Now we're on to other.
I have a handful of other pieces, we'll go down the side. And I've given a copy to the members of the institution committee, and I believe the commissioner has a copy.
I do.
Okay, this is the capital expenditure cash fund. Yesterday, we looked at the
Division.
Remember, this tied into our discussion yesterday where we're moving forward to release the money, 20 million that we held in reserve at the AA for redemption of the bond. And the savings or the impact in 23 are very modest, but in 24, we're talking about something in the vicinity of 6 million. So what this is doing is setting up that capital cash fund that we talked about it. This is the language to do it.
This sets up the fund, and the last page in this packet is a little bit of redraft of what you looked at yesterday. I had it being reserved. Now it's directing that FY24 savings into the fund. What the fund does not do is establish the ongoing revenue source that was proposed as part of the proposal from the administration. It sets up a report back, and the Commissioner of Finance Management in consultation with JFO and the Treasurer's Office on identifying recommending potential revenue, dedicated revenue sources, and doing that in the context of other unfunded fiscal pressures that we face. So this was a draft that Becky Wasserman and I put together last night, looked a bit of back and forth to actually create the fund.
So let's walk through it quickly here.
So the section X creates the fund titled 32. B is what the fund would consist of, which would be anything that we deposit into the fund and the savings from any early redemption of bonds. And that section would probably be amended if we did come back with a recommendation that was adopted for another type of dedicated revenue source. The funds can only be used to basically reduce the state indebtedness, costs associated with proposed capital projects, reducing how the debt of the state, the general obligation of the state would be without it. The fund balance, everything remains in the fund unless applied by the legislature. And then you see in section Y is where we set up.
Like 3, which is costs associated with early redemption. On the other hand, there are savings from early redemption. So the cost, sometimes you have to pay a penalty if you're redeeming.
I think there might be pressures under whatever.
So my question is, what costs do you, are there?
I think it would, I'm gonna look to the commissioner for a moment, but I think there might be, if you were redeeming a bond that had some sort of structure or premium that had
I think there can be
Yes.
penalties for
Yeah.
early redemption. So
Sure.
my question is, what does it mean, costs associated with early redemption? In the example we're talking about, there's actually a financial benefit to do it, but this is, sometimes there are fees. So I'm thinking maybe there are penalties for early redemption because people are investing in them at what they think is a favorable interest rate, and we redeem it and they get some kind of compensation. I don't know. Can you tell me what the costs are, Adam?
So the TIB bonds actually is a good example. Sorry, not the TIB bonds, the housing bonds that we have. They have penalties. We can redeem them early, but we'd have to pay a premium to do that.
Okay,
So-
that's what I was,
That premium, they are early redemption and eligible, but we'd have to pay a premium to do that. In other words, buy them back from investors at a premium. So the overall cost would actually be more than we're saving. But we may decide that we will pay a premium for a bond that's, say, outstanding for 10 or 15 years, and the interest savings would be more than the premium we pay. So we could make that decision, but in that case, we'd have to pay the penalty up front.
that's what I thought.
It's unlikely we would do that, but I think it's not a bad idea to allow us to, in case the math works for us.
Mhm. Once again, lifespan, et cetera. Is this, and this is what you and Becky worked out?
I think that took the language that was originally proposed, for the most part.
Fund balance will be carried forward. Early redemption,
So if we
and
do
then the
it-
debt service would be sort of corralled and you can, go back, be made, that funding would be.
Just like we're doing with the idea of once we do the $20 million in 24.
Yeah, kind of like what we're doing in pensions.
Yes, in an opposite way, the plus part.
Now we have a study and a report
Yeah, and so this is the idea that the original proposal from the administration had a it's sort of an ongoing dedicated revenue source based on a percentage of the general fund, less the debt service as an ongoing dedicated revenue source. And so that's not part of the structure as it's drafted in the first section. It's a look and see, and it's in the context of looking at that, it's looking at, you know, any type of dedicated revenue source in the context of other fiscal pressures, essentially.
Shall submit a report on the study. I know what, let's get rid of this study and call it an analysis.
Okay.
Studies and task force and all that, I mean, it seems to me these are really, we're talking about an analysis of benefits and costs, so I think we should just use the title analysis and not study. All right, any comments or
And Becky
editorial
also did some
suggestions?
fixes on the editing of the C102.1 section. We'll update that to reflect.
So we're appropriating the 20 million to the state treasurer and to redeem GAO bonds prior to maturity, which is what we reserved the money for. This is really doing what we did in the BAA.
Yes, no, what your original proposal to DA was, but except that we're corralling that FY24 debt service savings into the new capital expenditure tax.
Committee will set on this. Institutions likes it. And wanted it to be done in the budget, along with the authorization to move the 20 million to the treasurer for bond redemption.
This is all some of that federal money.
No, this is cleaning up the state's debts. And
With
Great.
general fund,
no, this is the 20 million was all general fund. And what we're putting in is general fund equivalent. It's just that we're not bonding, it's more of a pay-go, it's creating a fund so that we can move to more of a pay-go and pay less on debt service, which we fund in the, in the big bill. Okay, what you got for us?
So I have a redraft of the dispatching language. We didn't get to it. We got sent back to a couple members early in the week.
Okay.
And I haven't heard anything back from Commissioner Sherling on it.
Dick,
I'm
Senator
wondering,
Sears, have you heard anything back on this language? You're muted.
I have not heard back, but I thought it looked good when I read it, and
I highlighted the 8 million. I did look, and I think you could probably change that to 6.5 million as the amount that would sort of be going out to the existing ones that are taking the overflow and the two that are most ready to move forward. So it would allow.
But this says for new. So your comment about the existing ones, I'm a little.
So part of the budget, so yeah, that's it's true.
Well, it says it can be used to provide grants for establishing for new. So it's not limiting it to that, I guess.
But part of the proposal for the $11 million was for new and some money to the existing ones, the 4 existing regionals.
I have problems with this stuff. I mean, we gave them a ton of money, not very many years ago, to reset the Williston or that office up there. And we have, up north, we have town after town that's pulled out of the Williston dispatch and gone to Newport City dispatch. As a matter of fact, I was on the phone this morning with people from Island Pond, and they went to Colebrook, New Hampshire to get away from that mess in Williston.
And some down in Wyndham County are using other parts of New Hampshire.
So I think something like this ought to be reviewed this summer and come back next winter with a definite, I mean, this isn't a plan here. He didn't know where the 4 would be. And I hate to throw $11 million at an apple that's half rotten.
Well, Senator Sears, do you want to comment? I know that you spent some time on this. And the fact is that what we have is a system under great pressure. It's been sort of ad hoc. And we've got, in fact, like Lamoille County Sheriff dispatch is by default picking up a much higher because the calls are getting referred. There, some towns are paying, like probably the Colebrook, arrangement, they're having to pay a fee. Other towns are paying nothing because they're doing it through the state police. But my impression was that we have several dispatch now that are ready to go, and that would be Rutland County seemed to be.
I thought there were 3 that were ready to go.
Rutland is the one.
Yeah. So you have 4 that are existing regional dispatchers, and then you have 4 that are queued up, and Rutland is not.
Not quite there.
Is the furthest behind in
So
timing.
one would be Chittenden County and one would be,
One would be Washington County, and
was it Wyndham?
I think it is either Windsor or Windsor, it's down that way.
Now, I just would comment that I think we need to give this flexibility to the administration or the Department of Public Safety to get this thing going. Reserving the $11 million until next year will just delay improvements. And I think, I think with all the great intentions, the 2 dispatch centers haven't worked out as were intended. This is trying to move forward. Now, whether of the 8 million, do we give them spending authority and keep an eye on it? Yes. And that's part of this language. So I'm supportive of going forward with releasing 8 million, leaving 3 in reserve.
Or 6.5, Stephanie was thinking might be better.
Well, because of Rutland.
Rutland and the 2.5 of the sort of first year of operation is really more out
Mhm.
in the future. So
Okay, so Bobby's got his hand up and then Rich.
Phil, that's.
Oh, I'm sorry, Phil.
For me.
I just have a couple of corrections if we go with this language. So down 4 lines, it says on the status for grants, should be of grants, I think. And then down in,
You have your red pen out too, don't you?
I do,
Mhm.
if you count up,
Literally.
count up from the bottom 2 3s, it says identify and state resources should be any, I think.
Yeah.
And then back up on the top, it says September, November 2022, I assume we're picking between those?
Yeah, there's joint fiscal committee meetings in September, one in September, one in November, and so I wasn't sure which people would prefer.
So we need to pick one.
Yeah.
I would think maybe, I don't know, Dick, do you have a sense of, would they be ready to give us an update as early as September?
I would think.
Okay. I think the sooner we get.
You can have it
a
September and
sense
ask them to come back in
Yeah,
November.
Yeah,
So-
let's go earlier because I think what we know now is our current system is vulnerable and they're having to put a lot of calls are having by default going out onto these other dispatch systems.
40%.
40%.
40% of the calls are, the overrun is going to the 4 existing regional dispatch.
So I guess we could say that the proposal that we agreed to a few years ago was not,
Well, how much are we giving them already though for this
This-
operation?
for the state police, that there was, I think we had some, language, and is it here, Stephanie, it's hard to see. That basically said, we want public safety to identify what they would have for savings, if in fact they have a
It's
reduced.
number 3, the second 3 from the bottom, that identify any, where the and was supposed to be any state resources that may become available once the new dispatch system is fully operational, and recommend if and how such resources should be distributed. The two equitably to reduce, the two is in the wrong spot.
Okay, oh, you missed that. So that was intended to say, after you got, more set up and less volume is coming through
On the
your,
state side.
on a state police system, what does that translate into? Fewer positions and what that money would equate to?
That's one of the
that's
things
what
the
it reads
task force
as.
is charged with, trying to understand, might be.
But we know it'll vaporize like, dew before the sun, probably, is what your facial
Right.
expression is telling me.
The last email I have from,
I think that an awful poor way to spend $11 million, because the state can't run this stuff. You let the sheriffs do it, some private guy, you give them.
That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
So,
But so I guess we need to be really clear that that is what we're doing. And the state police would do, when the 911 calls, then those that require state police would go to state police dispatch, and they would dispatch their own,
That's the end result of the
work.
heading.
And the regional have a better sense of what agencies, what, fire departments, what, services, et cetera. So, I think in retrospect, the consolidating everything with the complexity that it involved, was, less successful. So Senator Westman.
I just, in this process that's set up, the first year there was, in their proposal, I think it was 2.5 million set aside for the
It was set aside for the first year of operating under the new regional.
first year of, are we disrupting that at all?
So that's what's, the 6.5 would just be for the grants to start getting the regionals that are ready to go, and the existing regionals, the 4 existing regionals also will be taking more volume, so they will be getting grants. So none of this $11 million is going to the state functions, it's only going out to the regional. To some is going to the 4 existing, but most is going to the new and standing up regional.
And we will deal with the ongoing money after the first year for all of them,
Yeah.
with this.
And in the long term, the point of the task force is also to identify beyond that first year of ongoing funding, what might be an equitable way to.
Because
Which is number 1.
Yeah, because the 4 existing are afraid that they're gonna get left in the lurch going forward. And so I'm asking these questions because of those questions and their fear that they're gonna get left in.
Yeah, that the focus will only be on the new. And that's not the intent of this, the task force is to look statewide across the operating costs and how it can be fairly and equitably.
Because right now, the funding that comes out, and I'm gonna say.
Yeah, but they don't, they're picking up 40% more, but they're not getting paid for it.
Well, they get some.
Well, I know, but they
because-
only partially reimburse
Right,
for their
but-
costs.
Yeah, I'm gonna say per seat of the person working in Lemoyle, for example, is someplace between 40 and 45,000 per employee doing the work, and that's it. So the local towns, the 10 towns in my county, plus Berry City and Berry Town are putting a lot into holding that system together. So going forward in the long term, I can understand their concern.
Well, Absolutely. The intent is not to destabilize the ones that we've got, but recognize that the system where we're having it all default, by default is not.
Well, and
Desirable.
I will say in that, many of the calls that are coming into the, to Lamoille, which are a lot of the overrun, are towns that aren't paying anything.
Well, so there's tremendous inequity, there's no question with the current system.
Yeah.
So Senator Sears, you reviewed it, Senator.
Yeah,
found a
and
few-
we, I just did find an email from Commissioner Sherling. He was going to get back to us. This was from Sunday. He said our team will review tomorrow, and I have not heard back about the
I'm
team's
sure we'll
review.
hear soon if this is a problem, but otherwise, this is really.
Hey, because I didn't hear anything.
The, getting into district dispatch and where there's familiarity with the locality. We'll get to this equitable rather than some are paying, some are not. And the fact that we've got a system that's overloaded and it's really falling back onto the regional dispatch, not through any plan, but by just, by necessity.
So, and I've been where the 6.5 will be distributed, I'll integrate for the existing regionals or as part of the grants too, not just the 4 new.
So 1 second, we'll come back, but with those corrections. Okay. What else you got there, Steph?
So I have broadband.
Oh,
So, and E911. So the interesting fact is that the Vermont Community Broadband Fund doesn't have a line item in the budget. It has this.
It's amazing what you discover when you go back and look.
So there is not spending authority necessarily for the broadband board, except with sort of in statute of this 1.5 is appropriated. And so this has to do with both A911 and the Vermont Community Broadband Board. We'll stick with the board first, the broadband board. Maria Royal drafted this section. I added a little bit to it, but what's section W here, the first section, the existing statute, this is up to 1.5 million annually to fund the operational costs. She's adding approved by the General Assembly.
Right now, there's nothing, it's just hanging out there.
Yeah, and so as we go through, and I contacted Christine Helquist and asked for the 23 budget. They haven't done it yet, which is, but they're putting it on the board's agenda. So we need a way to get them started for the fiscal year and brought on board as a normal budgeting process. And so that's what's happening in section X, is asking them to come back in late next fall with their updated FY23 budget, and that'll be incorporated into the budget adjustment. They are funded entirely with special funds or federal fund overhead. And also propose a 24 budget, an FY24 budget in a manner that it can be included in the governor's FY24 budget recommend. And then we're in sub C, directing them to, their underlying state money is in the universal service fund connectivity, there's 4% dedicated now to the broadband board fund. But we want them to maximize to the extent they can under the federal grants that they have, the admin overhead for their costs first before they tap into state funds. The section XX that you see on page 2, that was just an addition I made before coming.
There's a typo on line 8.
There's 2 others there.
That's me, that's not Maria Royal.
There's,
And we need to get them started in 23, and I was just bringing
It's a board.
And then at the end of that
Phonetically.
line should be the intent of, and then on the line below it should say is to provide.
Yeah, Stephanie, you can see Stephanie's working.
Next.
Yeah.
But your eye thinks it's there too when you're. So this was, it's simply intended to give them spending authority to start the fiscal year. And then what's happening in section X will catch up and they'll be in a normal budgeting process. Section Y, this is where we're getting into the E911 structure. So there is unexpended balance in the connectivity initiative fund right now. And so what section Y would do is sweep that balance back basically into the universal service fund, and that can cover E911 with FY23.
Without doing it.
On the one-time list. And so, and we do know that the House Energy Committee is working on thoughts and taking testimony and looking at the universal service fund to see if there's a long-term structural solve to the funding of the E911 fund.
Can I just ask about, it says any balance remaining in the connectivity fund shall be available within universal service fund.
So the connectivity fund sort of a substructure of the universal service fund.
I see. Okay.
And so it's like an account in the universal service fund. And so, and what this is saying is we're leaving it in the universal service fund and we're gonna allow it to be used for E911.
To address that deficit, but we know that we've got to deal with the ongoing cost of the system.
Yeah.
And the way the universal service fund, if you remember the testimony from the director, they're like third in line.
Well, they're actually near the top, but once you siphon the point that we're off the top, then it falls down to the bottom.
So what is happening is the revenues into the fund are declining, and so what's, after you take that off, take off the top, what gets left is not adequate to fund 911. So the governor's proposal was to use general fund. And what we're looking at is there money there that's unexpended? So that we, at least for this year, we can use those unexpended funds, as Stephanie says, sweep them and apply them to the deficit for 911. And that's what that's intended
what's
to
supposed to
do.
be
And that
happening
frees up a
essentially.
little money for us as
On the
we're
one-time list.
on the one-time list.
Section Z here, I don't know if any towns got significant ARPA money. One of the ways they can draw that ARPA money is something called the standard allocation. They can just tell the federal government, we're taking our standard allocation for revenues that we've lost, and if it fits within that, then you're just done. You don't have to document anything else to Treasury on drawing your ARPA dollars. There's some concern if you do it that way, is that a tax revenue now then? And then we have underlying statute around the CUDs that tax money can't go to CUDs. And so what this language would do.
Oh, that takes care of that problem, that
Yes.
the towns couldn't give their money to the CUDs.
So what it's stating is, notwithstanding the watch the economy, a municipality may accept and finance broadband projects with their chunk of ARPA dollars. Because it wasn't, the restriction in statute and the way they draw the dollars, there was concern. And so this would simply very clearly state that they can use their ARPA dollars to support the CUDs within their
district. And and what we're talking about here is 176 million that went out directly to towns. And then they found that the state provision stood in the way of using those federal ARPA dollars that the towns receive to help support the broadband initiative. So this deals with that problem created by state statute.
So is this 70 in G, the 69 million?
So that's the next one we're going to. So,
Before we
yeah,
leave that top one, just wondering what lost revenue is.
so that's that standard allocation. So one of the things that you can draw, you have to demonstrate to Treasury that your ARPA dollars are for COVID things. One of the things that you can draw for is lost revenue.
Oh, I see.
And Treasury has made this standard allocation easy way to draw under that.
Yeah.
Up to a certain level, you can just say, yes, I certify that we've lost revenue, and you don't document anything else, you just draw the funds in.
Got it.
And that's what a lot of towns would like to do, I think, is the way to draw the funds in.
And probably that's being recommended. So,
Should there be any connection here to the broadband Well, the bill we have in judiciary, patent judiciary with regard to the farmers, the farmer in Tunbridge.
Oh, that's the liability though. That's,
Right.
there's,
In the future.
except my understanding is that in fact, there's a sequence of liability and ultimately the company that subcontracted carries the liability, but that's a different.
But I mean, for the future, should there be anything that speaks to if it's done again, that there would be some way to mitigate the.
Not in the budget, it would have to, that gets into legal protection, Alice, so I don't know whether that's something judiciary. And I do know that finance, because it's an insurance issue, said in fact, there would be compensation, it's just whose pocket it came out
Yeah, I
of.
think it will all get settled, but I'm thinking about the future.
That's,
Yeah.
this is just allowing them to use the money and dealing with the state statute that creates the obstacle to doing it.
To actually doing something like the CUDs, which have risk, you can't commit the tax.
Yeah.
The next amendment here, which is the G500, this is based on what's in the House bill, and it's the bold language that any ARPA dollar can be used to match the IIJA $100 million that's coming to Vermont under the formula. Our section of the bill will have $95 million instead of
We're
69.
using the capital.
And it will be the ARPA capital dollars instead of the state fiscal relief fund dollars. But we do want this language to make sure that we're using the ARPA dollars to match the IIJA dollars that are also gonna come in under the Vermont Community Broadband's purview.
So the figure will change because of.
And the source of funds won't be state fiscal relief, it'll be capital.
Is that gonna be part, is that
And the last-
part of the 150,
No, that's on, you're,
the
What-
1.5 billion? Is this money part of the money that we're talking about in 6, the 1.5 billion?
no, that's only, it should be a 1.5 million.
Yeah,
Yeah,
We
it's
got two.
1.5 million.
yeah, so
That's,
that's,
that's for the administration of the board, of
Yeah.
our own Vermont broadband board that Christine Halswest is
Okay.
the
the
head.
staff of the board and their costs and their.
In G, the 95 million that we're gonna have here is actually to fund the rollout and the expansion of broadband services.
But I don't know if I should say we, but we talk about 150 million or something.
That's what you allocated last year.
Yeah.
In the bill last
This
year.
This is on top of
On
it.
top of that, so
This is-
now we're over 200,
Well, I think our goal was 250, wasn't it, in the,
I think our goal was 250, the cost, I think, is in the 400 to 450 range.
so we're almost half.
yeah, except there's a high probability of more money
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
down.
So there's the 150 we put in last year, the 95 we'll be putting in this bill, the 100 that they're likely to draw under IIJA, and then that's gives you the 350-ish range. And then there are opportunities in IIJA for some competitive grants and some additional money.
So we're in good
We
shape.
really should be making some substantial inroads on. Of course, the only problem is everybody feels they should be the first in line,
Well,
and somebody's gonna have to be last, but, this, the language is just to make sure that we
That we get that,
maximize.
that we get the matching.
have a place.
And we'll change
As
it,
we,
the
as
95.
they allocate the dollars.
Okay, so, what else have you got?
So now I can switch another topic and we'll wade into cannabis. And this is, I think this one or two pages, so I'll keep this one, and send this one down. And I have a spreadsheet, if people would like to look through that, to go through.
I just want to connect this back to our earlier decision in the DAA. Remember, we were concerned about creating a new internal deficit. because our fees couldn't be set high enough to support the cost of the administration. And a lot of it was because of requirements that the,
That's why we fronted.
well, so this, but the issue, this is really to deal with the fact that the fees don't cover it and how we cover the cost before we start making allocations. So this is.
So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'll try and walk through the spreadsheet relatively quickly,
And then we'll go to
and then I'll go to
the
the amendments. So top left box on the corner of the spreadsheet, that's what's in the forecast right now that we adopted in January regarding the excise tax. The right-hand side is the picture of the deficit in the cannabis board. So 701, the estimate is it would raise 950 in fees this year and about just under 1.5 next year. The operating cost of the board, and this does have the fingerprinting in it now. You see at $2.8 million, that's with the 11 positions added. And then the two pieces associated with the IT. And so, and then you see the IT doesn't roll out, but the operating costs roll out. And so under 23, with just the fees in the board world, you were looking at a 3.3 deficit, assuming that all the estimates come in, as they are, and an ongoing deficit in the $1.6 million range in the way we've set it up right now. And then we have a requirement in statute to true up. That retirement's only for FY 22, however. 23, I can't remember, but it's only for 1 year because we thought we'd be, up and running. So the proposal, which is below the hard line, is to look at the construct of the excise tax. So you have the fee revenue, same estimates. The excise tax, which is 5.6, instead of having that flow to the general fund, have that flow to the cannabis regulatory fund. We would cover the first year of the IT system in FY 22. There's enough money on the bottom line of the general fund to cover that, so we don't have to cover that in this construct. And then we would direct at whatever is left back into the general fund. And then 30% of that direct app is what would be directed to prevention. So in 23, you would have a direct app of $3 million, a little over $3 million, instead of $5.6 million going into the general fund. 30% of that, almost $1 million, would be set aside for prevention. And then 2.1 would be going into the general fund. That is a pressure on the general fund of about $1.7 million, but it takes care of the deficit structurally. And going out the next year, you would have $3.15 million of the direct app under these estimates, because the excise tax grows from 1.6 to 12.1. So you have 3.14 for prevention and 7.3 to the general fund. And you would have no deficit ballooning in the cannabis board special fund.
And then we would be making decisions in the normal appropriation process.
Around those dollars that are flowing into the general fund. That would be part of the regular budget process.
After 25, 26, yeah.
I think we could get a loan on using that as collateral, these estimates.
I'm sure we could if we wanted to.
So committee, this is sort of taking us where we are now, looking at the flow of money. This is why when we're talking about prevention, you can see by 24, and then depending on what revenues look like,
It grows another step in 25.
It's gonna continue to grow that 30%. And so we've got over 3 million that is being allocated under the statute, yes.
Can I ask how the committee across the hall views this?
So we're not changing any rates, we're just changing the flow. What
Understood, but I thought at the beginning of this year, I thought since it was excise tax money, they were more involved in determining.
Well, once the tax is set, we're not changing that, and we're not changing the fees.
Yeah,
We're just changing the flow so that we underwrite
yeah,
the.
Well, if the general fund's making them whole for, this,
oh, yeah.
we got a,
Plus, we're fronting the money to get this all going, so. it
that's what I
shouldn't
was
come
just saying.
No, I'm pleased with this. I'm just wondering if it.
But our goal is not to create a new, really,
So we do that.
internal service deficit. If we don't do this, then the deficit is gonna grow to what you say, 6 or 7 million.
You would be at just under 5 million in 2 years, and then you'd be over $6.5–7 million in 3 years.
So
pay
this
it
is,
as
this
you
is a
go.
way of taking,
This is,
I'm sorry, Dick, yes.
go ahead.
No,
I was-
I would say this is a way of recognizing what we have for fees now, what the projected revenues, and looking at the administrative cost and not, and having that off the top first as opposed to all defaulting to the general fund.
Yeah, I totally agree. The only place that I am concerned about is, once again, the sales tax, which all goes to the ed fund for after-school programs, doesn't contribute anything to the cost of the board.
And we're gonna change that.
That doesn't change in this
That
scenario.
doesn't change. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because after-school programs, when we talk about prevention, that is one of the best prevention investments out there. And kids directly benefit. It's not bureaucracy, it's not, meetings. It's really, to me, it's one of the best things that we can do on the prevention front. So while we're looking here at the money that's available for prevention, this is only one piece of that. And I don't know, what would be the, so looking at the sales tax side, Stephanie,
Yeah.
well, what would that generate for after-school programs?
Well, in year one, under the current forecast, it's about 2.4 sales tax into the,
But that's gonna grow.
that's gonna grow, so it's the same ratio, 2.4 to 5.6.
It's gonna,
So whatever that might be.
It'd be there 6%.
well, it doesn't matter. I only wanna make the point that this is only one component of how these revenues are being invested in prevention. And when kids are in after-school programs, they're supervised, they've got mentoring, they all have, good nutrition. The evidence is very strong for that. So we've had a lot of discussion about where we set priorities and who's benefiting, and I just wanted to remind people that this is prevention in the.
You went over to North, to their, didn't you go to
Their
their,
after-school program, they had 100% participation.
amazing what those kids do.
Yeah.
And we're excited and.
I know, they really, and kids after school, they're really hungry too, and going home to an empty house or whatever, so. It also helps on childcare, because a lot of the parents are there to pick up their kids at 5:30 or.
It's a huge benefit in terms of parents that don't pay for childcare.
That's
Yeah,
right,
sure.
absolutely huge. So I
think
just thought we might as well put that out, because people are gonna be listening. And I know we've been getting a lot of requests, the governor put more into prevention, but I'm just saying, this is right on our doorstep, and this is what the figures look like, and they're gonna grow.
Back,
And the
back to, I'm sorry,
That
back,
2.4 should be almost 5.2 the next year, if the estimates turn out. It does, that caveat, I just want to reiterate, your early days, year one is particularly the most fragile.
What does SUD stand
back to
Substance use disorder.
Dick's point.
What?
Dick, is your point that there should be some sort of debit from that sales tax to account?
Well, I find that once again, we, protect the ed fund from any of the costs of administration of what they're gonna get. And so while the excise tax is now, and I like this setup, but the excise tax is basically covering the operations of the board and not the sales tax,
But
it seems to me.
But then all that would do is reduce the money for after school, so it's just
Right.
which pocket you know, which way you want it impacted.
Dan, it's just this, it's just, you know, I'm still peeved about the community high school of Vermont.
Yeah,
Well, we're gonna switch that to it.
Well, I don't have much hope in the House ever going along
We're
with the
not gonna
governor
go
and the
back.
Senate.
We're gonna have more discussion, but the community high school of Vermont of today is not exactly the community high school of 10 years ago in terms of what it does, and it's not what we would think of as the traditional academic opportunity, so.
Can't imagine why.
Do you want to quickly
Okay,
walk
so-
through the amendments? Anthony
Yes,
did,
why don't we
and
look
Michelle
through
drafted,
the-
or most Nancy, I think, drafted these.
So this is the language that would really do
Accomplish
this.
that.
Okay,
And
so why
so-
don't we go through this?
So you see in section WW, that's an existing section of law. it
Oh,
says-
and Senator Sears, please take notes, Stephanie mentioned the fingerprinting as one of the administrative costs. That was response to our conversation with Bryn Hare. You had it. So I just want you to know that that's reflected here.
We reflected it in the operating costs of the board. So the change in 7 VSA 845 is this new sub 3, where the excise tax right now, because it doesn't say where it goes to the general fund. Now we would dedicate that excise tax to the cannabis regulation fund. And then in the new sub D, every year, at the end of the year, the transfer of the unexpended would carry as a direct app like any other direct app. Unexpended, unobligated balance of the cannabis regulation fund goes into the general fund. And that's that estimate of $3 million in '23 and $10.5 million in '24 on the sheet.
Okay.
And then we report that estimate to the joint fiscal committee in July, like TFR does.
Oh,
No, we don't need capital bill, but all we're doing is stripping off those three.
Capital fund.
Capital.
I saw Stefan's language, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And we also
Yes, I
did,
did.
so no, because we already know what you're gonna do, and if you don't do what we,
We always do what you guys want us to do.
You don't do what we know you're gonna do, you're in
So,
trouble.
the change is minor, just taking those three appropriations for broadband, libraries, and the connectivity, putting them in the G section of the budget, we'll appropriate them directly using the capital 113 million.
Right.
Okay, and the language on the cash fund, you've already seen and will be in the bill as well.
Okay.
I should be able to get it out this afternoon, Joe.
Logistics problems with committee members, that's what the big issue.
Which committee members?
Yeah, we'll take care of that.
Now we'll resume your normal afternoon.
We'll take care of it.
So this has the direct app being recorded every year in July for the previous fiscal year. That's like DFR.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is just.
What's not like DFR is the new section XX, which just is applying that 30%, not to exceed $10 million,
Which is in the statute.
which is in the statute, to the direct app amount as opposed to the underlying excise tax amount.
See,
And then, so that's what's happening in section XX. We're keeping that 30%, it's just what it's applied to because of the way the money's changed in the flow.
And I did tell Bryn that we would send,
Oh, this over to her, okay. I will send it to her.
I'm not sure I mentioned it to you, so.
Section YY is a repeal, and that's where, when we passed the bill originally, we had intended the cannabis regulation deficit to be offset first by the excise tax. We don't need this anymore because we have set it up so that it doesn't create a deficit. And then we had this sort of aspirational language in section CZ. Oh, we, that's what I'm missing a piece, but we had, I think, aspirational language about, oh, no, the deficit,
This is the deficit offset.
yeah.
Oh, because we're not building the deficit that we're gonna pay back over the next 100 years. Maybe that's why it doesn't need to be there.
Gonna pay it up front.
Well, yeah, by the time we get to 25, we should be rolling and go
Oh,
for anybody who's around.
yeah.
Oh, we must have, it's the same, section YY is easy, or the same underlying. Section 6, it shall take effect.
Yeah, they are in section 6C.
We must have done something with the timing in the 2 stages, the second bill of the, we did some technical corrections. And so I'll figure out why we're, have 2 sections.
All right,
that are
so,
doing
but
six.
Committee, in concept, committee, I just need to close this out. This is our effort to deal with how we start up this new program, avoid this growing deficit and having the cost of the program. Okay, all right,
No, it's good.
all right, thank you. So Stephanie, you can just check on the 2 repeal pieces.
Yeah, actually, Anthea went through it, so
Oh, she's,
You count the beans,
okay.
double check.
So,
maybe Chris can send them a text. All right. You have more language, Stephanie?
I don't have
No,
more
your
language.
flashlight's on. I
oh, how do I turn it off?
I don't know. It's beamed right at me.
There it is.
No, Stephanie, swipe up, yeah, and it should open your little control thing.
Not doing it.
No,
You had it.
It has a little,
That's
thing,
for-
the little
That little
flashlight.
thing on the front should do it, that you were doing this before, on the bottom on the left.
Okay, who knows the flashlight?
I know how much.
So somebody tell me the time.
If you- 3:09.
Can you see it, to hold it?
10 after 3.
There it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we through the language?
You're through the language. I think, do you want to take a break?
That's what I'm really thinking, that we
And
probably
then
need
we'll come
to
back
take
to the
a break.
base after each 159.
Yeah, we'll do 159 and then we're gonna go to the base general fund.
Break until 3:30?
So I'm going to take a break and go off live.